Davey Finch worked as a camera operator at CBS Sports for more than 40 years. He is indisputably one of the best ever at his craft. In 2010, he was inducted into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame, the first camera operator ever to be so honored. His fellow inductees that year included Pat Summerall and John Madden. So that's the air we're talking about. In this episode, you'll hear about Davey's introduction to TV, his big move to Hollywood, and some of his favorite moments. Think about what you do for a living. Picture that one person who does it better than anybody else. Now, imagine that nobody ever has a bad word to say about that person. That's Davey.
I demand satisfaction.
My name is Whit Watson, and this is Media Credentials. I'm a sports announcer who's worked a lot of places. This podcast will peel back the layers of sports media and show you how the sausage gets made. Through interviews with industry pros and my own experience, you'll understand why you're seeing what you're seeing and who's responsible for it. Your media credentials have been approved. In a previous episode of Media Credentials, I spoke to Sellers Shy, the lead producer for golf on CBS. You'll hear Davey Finch reference that interview, and you'll hear some names that Sellers also mentioned, including Steve Milton, the director who works alongside Sellers. Both of these episodes also reference the late Frank Cherkinian, the former CBS golf producer whose innovations in presenting televised golf remain industry standards today. In fact, it might be useful to listen to the Sellers episode as a sort of companion piece to this one. You'll also hear a few industry terms in this interview that might not be familiar. Davey refers to a hard camera or a fixed camera. That's exactly what it sounds like. A camera usually on a tripod that cannot be relocated during an event. That is opposed to a handheld camera or a mini, which can be carried on the shoulder and, in these days of wireless technology, can travel just about anywhere. Davey also uses the phrase walking him up. That's the term we use in golf when the handheld camera operator walks with a player from the fairway towards the green. And in fact, one of Davey's most famous shots happened as he was walking up a player. It was John Daly pumping up the crowd at the 1991 PGA Championship. Davey Finch retired from CBS in 2019 after 43 years on the camera, shooting not just golf, but the NFL, boxing, the Olympics, basketball, you name it. We spoke during the week of the 2023 PGA Championship, which Davey enjoyed from home. Davey, it's so great to talk to you. It's been a couple of years since you left us and fled to the West Coast to Newport Beach, California, where you are now. How are you? How is retirement treating you?
You know, Whit, thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be here right after Sellers Shy. And the retirement, after 4 years, is coming June 1st. And I love it. I really love it. I thought I would miss the traveling. I definitely missed the people I worked with for decades. But I really like staying home here in Southern California, I must admit.
I'm sure you do. And before we get back to the beginning, how long were you at CBS? How many years total?
Since 1975 was December is when I started, and my last day was June 1st, 2019. So I very, very lucky to have that many decades based at TV City and then CBS Sports in New York.
So from Tulsa, Oklahoma, you are a graduate of Will Rogers High School, and you're in their Hall of Fame. I looked that up as well. You started working in television in Tulsa. So tell me how that happened.
Well, I actually had lunch yesterday with the mentor, the person that actually got me the very first job in television, Mike Denny. He wound up being a director of The Young and Restless, the soap opera on CBS for many, many years. And he needed someone to pull his cable. He had a hard camera at the Tulsa State Fair. So I volunteered and I started pulling his cable, and eventually he got me a job at the local ABC affiliate, K2L TV. And I was able to work the 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift while I was going to the University of Tulsa during the day. So I was able to learn lighting, learn some camera work on the John Chick Country Music Hour, Monday through Friday from 7 to 8 every morning, doing news, a lot of studio stuff and stage manager. And that's where I really kind of got my feet wet in the television industry.
The big jump is something straight out of Hollywood. And in this case, it literally involves Hollywood because while you're at the University of Tulsa, you've got 13 credits left until you graduate, and you get an offer, an offer you can't refuse to move west. How did that happen?
Well, several people from the K2L TV affiliate went out there, and they were already working at TV City in Hollywood. And there was a little opening of window of where they were hiring staff technicians. And the window opened incredibly, probably about 6 months too early. My friends called me up. I was hired over the phone by Bob Lawson at the time there. And I had to pack up my 72 yellow Volkswagen and hightail it out there like the last of November and December of 75. My family, my mom especially, was furious. I didn't finish 13 credits at the University of Tulsa, majoring in communications. But in retrospect, it changed my life. The timing was there.
What did they have you do when you started at TV City for CBS?
I went right into camera work. I was doing some soap operas and some variety shows. One of the first variety shows I remember doing was Tony, Orlando, and Dawn. Tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree.
Sure.
Camera 4 at the back, trucking along the audience, and then eventually segue into soap operas like The Young and Restless, which I loved, The Bold and Beautiful. And sprinkled here and there were like Miss America pageants, Miss Universe pageants, political conventions all over the country. And eventually on the weekends, I wanted to start traveling. So I started doing some sports. They said, we got someone that's sick down here. Can you come down to La Jolla? It was called the Andy Williams golf tournament at the time. And I went in and did a hard camera on the 17th flanker, and renowned producer, director Frank Shirkinian was there. And he really clommed on to me and taught me just the basic, gut instinct of camera work, probably in the first hour when he started yelling at me. And from then on, he actually changed my life.
And I want to get to Frank in a little bit. Sellers Shy, who's the lead golf producer who you worked with at CBS for many years, he and I talked about Frank and the legend of Frank Shirkinian. But to back up for a second, what was it specifically about camera work? Because that is kind of a specific job in sports media. What attracted you to get behind the camera in the first place?
I have a creative streak, and I do like to create and make pictures. I'm not a painter, but I do like to take still photos, although I really was drawn into the video world very early on. They were still doing a 16 millimeter film for news at K2L TV, but all of a sudden this video thing came along, and I said, well, wait a minute. And I just love being behind the lens and making pictures. Something excited me about it right from the beginning. And I was lucky because I have a passion for it, and I loved it. And fortunately enough, I was doing what I loved and made a living at it.
The producer that followed Frank Shirkinian, and I will go back to him, was Lance Barrow, who was there for a very long time as well. And again, this was episode 6 of the podcast. Sellers and I talked about it quite a bit. And he said this, he said, Davey gives you more than just one option. He's always looking for the best shot. He's not satisfied by just getting a base shot. Usually his shots are the best anyway, but he's always working to improve, always looking for that perfect shot. For someone that has never operated a camera, how do you do that? How do you present more than one option to your director or to your producer?
I think the most important thing is you think outside the box. What really frustrated me when I first started out, I was working a hard camera on a tripod, and I wanted to pick up the tripod and move it 3 feet left or 3 feet right to get the right shot. Or I wanted to put it real high. I wanted to put it real low. And I said, wait a minute. let's try the handheld. Well, at the time, handhelds were the PC-90, the PC-70. They were real heavy. So, and
Right.
I was a scrawny little kid. But I just wanted to create different things and different looks from what I was seeing, just static shots on a tripod. It was driving me crazy. Lance helped me so much in my career early on, but he did always remind people that met me later, golfers and anyone we worked with, he says, don't be fooled by Davey Finch and the whole Hollywood story. He's just a kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So says the guy from Fort Worth, Texas, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're dear friends.
Let's go back to Frank Cherkinian. And for those who don't know the name, you can listen to episode 6 of the podcast, and I give a little more detail as to who he was. But essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Davey, he invented golf on television. 90% of the stuff that we take for granted when you watch a golf tournament on TV came out of the mind of Frank Cherkinian. What were some of the insights or the innovations that he introduced while you were working with him?
I think that he, besides all the first things he started with the scoring and the painted white cup and all that, I came in a little bit after that, or quite a bit after that. But he would demand the use of the handheld camera, and he would push the envelope and ask you to get in certain situations or create shots that had never been actually used before, mainly because the technology was being so advanced on the handheld level and the replay level that if you work for him, you better think outside the box and really come up with some doozies to cover an event, not just golf too. It could be Ollie Spinks in Vegas. He directed that. He wasn't afraid to give his crew the latitude and the rope to go out and be creative to a certain extent.
Was he as mercurial as he was portrayed to be?
Yes. We all do and dearly loved Frank. But I remember one of the first times on that tournament I told you about in Torrey Pines, one of the cameramen had gotten ill, and I did one of the two handhelds. And in the middle of a fairway, there was the leader. He was maybe 5 shots ahead. And then there was another, the other golfer in the group was 10 over, and he was in the trees. So what do I know? I go to the guy in the trees because I realize that no one can see him. In the meantime, of course, the leader hits. And he starts screaming at me, you mama, mama, mama. What? He doesn't mean anything, the guy in the trees. Where's the leader? Well, I felt horrible, just horrible. So I go up to him afterwards, and I say, Frank, I'm so sorry. He says, listen, kid, that just means you're fallible. Don't do it again. And I never forgot that. We're going to make mistakes. And I made mistakes, but like I tell the kids came up after me, you're going to make mistakes, but if you learn from them, it's a good thing.
Was Frank the kind of guy who would say, you can make a mistake, but don't make the same mistake twice? Was that the message?
Absolutely. And if you did make the mistake twice, and some of his announcers did, and we all did kind of, he would let you know in no uncertain terms.
Am I correct in assuming that golf was the first sport that you operated camera for? Is that where you started on the sports side? Was that event in San Diego?
Yeah, maybe some NFL games locally too.
Okay.
I did 20 years of the NFL with Summerall and Madden, which I was very proud of. And then branched out a little bit. Like I said, one thing that really stood out in my mind was the Ollie Spinks fight. That was 1978. He won an Emmy for directing it. That's where Spinks won over Ali. But where I remember the most is, I remember I was young. I was just a kid. There were 2 people in Ali's dressing room before the fight, Muhammad Ali and myself. And he's shadow boxing in the mirror, and I'm shooting that, and Frank put that on the air. And I'll never forget that. I really didn't expect Ali to lose, but he did.
Since you brought it up, you did work in the NFL. You worked on the NBA. You worked on NASCAR. You worked on NCAA basketball. You went to the Olympics a few times. Which one was your favorite to shoot?
Out all of those, and I was fortunate to have a career like that. I still have to go back to golf. I love the game, even though I'm not very good at it at all and hardly play ever. I just love the game. I love the people. I love the venues. I love the courses. And one in particular, I love the Masters. And the first one was in '77. I just got into it so much. I'm really proud to say I'm a really golf guy.
You were walking for most of those years. You talk about the handheld camera versus the fixed camera, the camera in the tower. How many years did you walk the fairways?
For decades.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it because at the time there were one or two mini cams at the time. It was all cabled. Now they're all wireless, of course. I worked until maybe 2010 or something when Lance and Barrow and Steve Milton recommended that I go up and replace Ricky Blaine on the 18th tower, and I started doing the hard camera on the 18th tower.
Now, here's a question I know you get asked a lot, because I get asked this question a lot, and I don't operate a camera, and that is, how do you follow a golf ball in flight?
By staying real tight on it and not zooming out. That's in a nutshell. But I don't think it's that hard. I think that's an acquired skill. If I put you in a camera with me for like a half hour and we're up on the 18th tower, and I'd say by the end of 30 minutes, you're going to be able to somewhat follow that ball, especially with a good video operator behind you. That's not the hard part, really. The hard part is when and what circumstances you're following that ball. And if Dustin Johnson or DeChambeau is behind a tree on the 18th fairway on Sunday and they come blasting out, you better have that ball. That's the hard part. When and where and under pressure. I feel the actual art and skill of following the golf ball, a lot of people do it. Some do it better than others, but I think it's not really that hard.
Are you getting help in that situation, the one you just described? There's somebody behind a tree. You can't fully tell when the swing has started. Are you getting any help? Is there a spotter?
Yes, there's spotters out there. And also you can look in your viewfinder and you can actually punch a button. You can see the mini cam that's behind the golfer. And you can also look at the line monitor to your right outside your viewfinder. And you can get a sense and Milton would always tell you the sense of where he's going to go high, he's going to go low, he's going to go through the trees, he's going left. And you have a lot of help on that. More importantly, the video operator is helping you too, because the iris is down at the moment the ball goes up into the sky or through the trees. And most of the time, you're going to have it.
I'm glad you said that, because it is a ballet, isn't it? People don't realize how many different voices potentially are in your headset at one time, and how many different people are doing something at the same time to make that one shot look good. And I imagine that the longer you stay with the same group, and CBS has, they're known, the golf group especially, known for being long tenured. I would imagine the longer you're together, the easier that symphony becomes. Is that right?
Absolutely. You have a lot of voices in your headset at the time. And if you know all the voices and what they're doing and what they're saying, it's a lot easier. I had the opportunity to freelance a little bit. And if I went into a different family and a different headset and started listening to different voices and their tones and inflections, I really didn't know who it was. Was it the AD? Was it the producer at CBS? Because we're so tight and so much of a family that the same voices were in there day in and day out. And when it really came down to the nitty gritty, I knew if Mark Dibbs was talking, I knew if Lance Barrow was talking, or Steve Milton. I knew if other cameramen were saying, Davey, he's over here, he's over here. And it just helps out a lot, because there's a lot going on in your left ear, and in your right ear, you might have the marshals talking to you. You might have your cable guy talking to you. You might have other golfers talking to you.
You mentioned all the voices in your headset. One of those voices would be the announce team. And how often would you break off from what you were doing based on what Jim Nantz was talking about at that moment and go try to find a shot to help back him up? How often would that happen?
Hopefully 100% of the time. I'm a big believer in listening to what you're talking about, program audio. And
Right.
I would listen during football, I'd listen to John Madden constantly. And if it was a blowout football game, he needed something to talk about. So if there's someone sewing up a torn jersey on the sideline, I'd get a tight shot of the hand and the needle, and bam, they'd take it away, and John would start talking about it. On the other hand, in golf, if Faraday's talking about, at the time, Faraday or Costas were talking about a lie, or Jim Nance is talking about the strategy of how Tiger's going to hit his approach in Akron, Ohio, and it winds up going on the roof of the clubhouse. I want to try and provide the pictures and support and show what he's talking about. If he's talking about the divot, let's go down to the divot. He's talking about the grip, let's go to the grip. Or if he's talking about the relationship between Tiger and Phil, and they're playing together, and you want to get that relationship shot between Tiger and Phil, back and forth, back and forth. It makes the director's job a lot easier if you provide that shot way before Steve Milton, the director, asks for it.
On the topic of Tiger and Phil, I can only imagine some of the conversations you had with these players over the years when you were in the fairway, when you were walking with the players. And I mean, you were 9 times out of 10 walking with the last group on Saturday and Sunday. What are some of your favorite conversations, moments, quips from players?
I feel very fortunate because Milton would assign me and Paul Sherwood, another cameraman, 2 handhelds to the final group for many, many years. Started following Tiger before he was even a professional. He was an amateur at Riviera. A lot of really offhand just conversations. Sometimes some golfers don't want to talk at all. Some want to really talk a lot, like Fuzzy Zeller. And most of the time it wasn't on mic. So a lot of times they just talk to be getting out of the moment versus staying in the moment. One particular shot at Akron, Ohio, I remember it was pouring rain in the 17th fairway, and I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have any rain gear. It was just one of those thunderstorms that popped up. And there's Stevie Williams, Tiger, and myself underneath the umbrella. And I'm really complaining, man, I can't stand this. I was wet. And the Tiger looks at me, he says, Davey, it's just water. Come on. And from that moment on, whenever I start getting wet, I tell the guys, hey, just remember, it's just water. It's just water.
I also read, speaking of Tiger and Firestone, maybe it was the same year, I don't know, you tell me, the famous shot that he hit in the dark at 18 with all of the flashlights popping on the green. You can barely see the green from the high camera. You were, I believe, in the fairway for that shot. Is that right?
Yes. I was either behind him and then after the shot, I started walking him up, which was one of my ideas early on. I was walking the players up on their final approach on the Sunday up to the green, and I mean really close to him too. But it was so dark out there, and you couldn't really see it at all. But the applause and the reaction of the fans at the green told you, and that's when Tiger turned to me and say, hey, Finchy, how's that? Do you like that? That was a really magical moment.
Let's go back to the Masters, which you had mentioned earlier. 1977 was the first year you worked at Augusta National. From a camera operator standpoint, how different is that event as opposed to a regular season PGA Tour event?
Night and day. The Masters, which I still consider to be the best major there is. I'm a little prejudiced on that. There's no hold bars on equipment usage and budget. And I mean, it just was a huge challenge each year to go from, say, a regular tournament, not a smaller tournament, just regular weekend we got tournaments. And all of a sudden you come to the Masters and the whole world's watching. We had so much equipment. Each year it started getting more and more and more, and the technology advanced more and more and more, which also hand in hand, the challenges and the responsibility of doing your best at the Masters was increasingly harder.
There's a lot of eyeballs on you at the Masters, aren't there? It's more scrutiny, I think, for everybody. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why you don't want to make a mistake. Not only are the patrons watching you, but the millions of people at home, and more importantly, your director's watching you. The golfers are watching you. The caddies are watching you. And you got to be tiptoe best professional behavior, doing your best at your job that you can be, especially at the Masters.
Does Augusta National have different regulations for the handheld camera operators than other events?
Not at first. No, they didn't. A good story from 1977, my very first Masters with Tom Watson winning. And there's a shot of me in blue jeans with bell bottoms on them, standing next to Nicklaus and Watson at the scoring tent. There was a little tent behind the green. I had a cable, 1,000-foot blue triax cable, and I was a kid. I didn't really know, okay, the Masters, it's okay. Tom Watson was winning. I walk him up, and after he won, I walk onto the green with the cable. I walk him across the green, and I'm walking him into the scoring tent, and I didn't know who they were, but all these marshals in these green jackets were trying to stop me. And of course, I didn't know any better, so I just follow him right in, sit down, he's signing his scorecard, and Frank's going, yes, yes, yes. Frank was pushing the envelope a little bit. Well, needless to say, several weeks after that, a letter came out. Jim Armstrong, the general manager at the time, was not very happy with my actions. And I had to do a mea culpa and apologize. And I said, yes, I'm sorry. And he said, reminded me that this is the Masters. We have certain rules and restrictions here. And from that day forward, I came to appreciate those rules and restrictions a great deal at the Masters.
So are you telling me that you almost got kicked out of the Masters your first year? Is that what happened?
Well, I think it'd be to tell the story. Jim would tell the story too. He asked that I be fired, and Frank came up to me in Hilton Head, which is the following week after the Masters. He says, "Listen, kid, don't do that again." And the rest is history. I did 43 Masters. The last one being on the 18th green with Tiger putting to win his fifth jacket in 2019. And I loved every minute of it.
That was an absolutely electric scene. I was also there for Westwood One and had to get a post-round interview with him. That was literally the most important thing I had to do all week. And what I remember about that Masters, well, all of it, but specifically as Tiger was being taken from the 18th after all of the signing the card, et cetera, and being moved up to the new press center, which is on the far end of the practice area now.
Sure.
And they put him in a golf cart, and nobody would leave, Davey. Nobody would leave. The patrons are lining the cart path, roaring. I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. And there were Augusta National employees who came out onto the second floor of the press building just to see him. They just wanted to be able to tell their kids they saw him when he won in 2019. What were your goosebump moments from that year, from the Tiger year?
It's definitely a goosebump ending because I think it was even more exciting and more important than his first win there because of what he went through and what he had to do to actually win his fifth green jacket. There's a reason why everyone wanted to stay there. I mean, what an accomplishment by Tiger to come back and win after all he went through. And the chills that went through my spine, and after that, right after it was all over, I'm saying, man, if I had to do one final Masters, this was it for me.
This is a setup because you told me that I could ask you this question because you and Jim Nantz apparently sat down at one point with some other folks, and you can tell the story about your most memorable shots. So how did you guys come up with this list?
He asked me casually late one night, what are my most memorable shots or best shots throughout my career? And I named a few, but then, the next day I said, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? What about this? And Sellers, shy, said, well, why don't you write them down? So I did. I always missed one of the most important ones. I already told you about the Muhammad Ali shadow boxing in the mirror. Jack Nicklaus, 1986. Not really a golf shot, but what's special about that, and talk about a spine, shivers going up your spine and all the roars. Nicklaus wasn't in the final group, so he had to go to the Eisenhower cabin and wait to see if he had won or not. And once it was determined he had won, they wanted a shot at Jack. Well, I was on my minicamp outside the Eisenhower cabin trying to shoot through the window, and I couldn't see him because of the reflection. It was nice and sunny. But then he comes out of the Eisenhower cabin, and I walk from there inside the security bubble over to the Butler cabin, and the only video camera there. And I knew how important that 86 Masters win was to Jack. And it really stuck in my mind. It really did. That one of the most memorable shots are times that I was actually there for that. And it just stuck with me. It just stuck with me. Just a quick one. John Daly, 91 PGA Championship, walking up the 18th fairway, and he's throwing the towel, whipping the towel in his right hand over his head. And that was one of those shots. I was walking with him up the fairway, and there everyone's screaming. And that really stood out in my mind, too. Let's go off of golf for a minute. The Dwight Clark catch,
Sure.
1981, the 49ers and the Cowboys. Although the replay wasn't mine because it went to a different side of the goalpost. Following that game, it was an exciting game. I went trying to run on the field and follow Bill Walsh. Bill watched the coach off the field, and a fan that had a little bit too much to drink came up to the right side of me and pulled my camera off my shoulder and slammed it to the ground until the cops went over and got him. That kind of stuck out in my mind for a while. So I'm a little on football, at least. I was a little bit more careful of where I was running. Another one was following the Kerrigan Tonya Harding drama up at the '94 Olympics. What really got me was when Nancy Kerrigan, she had won her silver medal, and she was waiting on the set to go out for the ceremony, and she was talking to me casually, and I had a microphone on my camera, but it wasn't on the air, and she said, "What is taking Oksana Bayul so long?" Because Oksana was in the dressing room putting on her makeup, and on just offhandedly, Nancy said to me, "Well, why is she putting on her makeup? She's just going to cry and it's just all going to come off." And unfortunately, it was recorded and it made air. And Nancy wasn't happy with me for a while, and just for a while, that was not a very good thing. One more thing, another shot, 1991, the Connors-Crickstein match at the U.S. Open. There's one particular replay where Jimmy Connors, the crowd is so much behind him. He just gets so revved up and he starts fist pumping in the air. And for some reason, once again, I was on the handheld. I was really up close to him, really personal, really wide angle lens. And that really stuck with me. Although he didn't go on to win the Open then. It was so exciting. It was just that moment. That's the great Jimmy Connors shot that says Jimmy Connors in a nutshell. This is probably the shot that I regret missing the most. And I have to go way back after 40 some years. When Gene Sarazen hit his double eagle on 15 at the Masters, I had a camera there, but my flash didn't go off. And to this day, I regret it because there's no video of Gene Sarazen's double eagle. I tell that to people now, and the old timers start laughing because they realize it was 1935. But and I'm not that old, I'm only 70. But the young kids go, "Really? Really?" And they say, "Well, who's Gene Sarazen?" There you have it.
That's funny. You got me. It took me a half a second. Did he just say Gene Sarazen? He can't possibly be serious.
I wasn't.
That's very funny.
I wasn't. But some people do believe me. It's funny.
I read somewhere, Davey, that as you moved on in your career, that you were asked to come work on some specialty shoots, not necessarily the live action, but some kind of more creative stuff. What were those shoots like?
I'm glad you asked that because that really helped re-energize my creativity and my whole interest in shooting. Because shooting live television with a camera is one thing, but going out and shooting and creating and covering stories and creating opening teases, it's real exciting for me, and it was challenging. I started shooting opening teases with Steve Milton and Lance Barrow and Jim Rickoff when they were just starting out, and feature stories with Bob Drum and other Gary McCord and Peter Costas doing the golf tips. But recently, in the last decade or so, the creative director of CBS Sports, Pete Radovich, picked me up, and we started creating a lot of beautiful television pieces together, opening teases for football, for the Super Bowl. And I really, really enjoyed traveling around the world and shooting things that were not exactly that I wasn't tied to a cable and a live event.
One thing I hear a lot is just gratitude, how much fun you had, the close relationships with the other people at CBS Sports. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, as you look back on all those decades holding the camera, behind a camera, what words come to mind to you?
Since I've been retired, I've had a chance to look back and to really ponder the decades I spent with CBS Golf and CBS Sports as a whole. And one word that was so important with Frank, with Lance Barrow, and now Sellers Shy is the word family. And not only in golf, but at CBS Sports New York in general. If you work there, whether you're a freelance or you're staff, it's really the atmosphere is like a family atmosphere. Now, sure, you have arguments. Every family has arguments. We have our ups and downs. But overall, it's such a warm atmosphere and such an enlightening atmosphere that it really promotes creativity. It promotes so much positive energy around the compound or any football game, any golf. It's a great way to set up the workplace to where you actually are excited to get up and go to work. And I have to say it comes from the top, sports management in New York and the top producers out in the field. They promote that family feeling. And that's really what I remember the most about it. And I'm so grateful that I was part of it for decades.
In just a few seconds, we'll have some closing thoughts on this episode, so stay tuned. If you're enjoying it so far, please consider subscribing or sharing and leave a review. Let me know what you'd like to hear in the future on Media Credentials. Did you catch that list of Davey's favorite shots? Muhammad Ali versus Leon Spinks in Las Vegas, better known as Ali Spinks 1, in 1978, he was the ringside handheld camera operator. Tiger in the Dark at Firestone. That was the WGC NEC Invitational in 2000 in Akron, and Davey was the guy holding the camera behind Tiger on the last hole. John Daly, the 1991 PGA at Crooked Stick, when he swung his right hand over his head to get the crowd revved up, that was Davey's camera. Jimmy Connors, the 1991 U.S. Open against Aaron Krickstein, when Connors went nuts into the face of the handheld camera on the court, that was Davey. The Catch, Joe Montana to Dwight Clark in the 1981 NFC Championship game, Davey was the near side handheld camera at that game. And by the way, I looked up all of these shots on YouTube. Davey reminds me of Forrest Gump. Right in the middle of all of these iconic moments. The only difference is that Davey was the one holding the camera. Thanks again for listening to Media Credentials. For examples of my work, including video and audio clips, a blog, and my contact page, check out whitwatson.com.